Hello everyone, here's Hussam with you from Giuliani Associated Architects. Welcome back to RKI Tech TV, and we'll go through 3D architecture visualization. We'll continue with what we uh, end up last lecture, which is the basic function part 2, and we will start a new topic, which is the basic modeling technique. When we talk about the modeling technique, there is a lot of them, but there are two phase of techniques that we will go through. The first one is using the primitive, and the second one is the 3D polygon modeling tool. Okay, so let's go and cover the part one, which is the model with primitive. Okay, so let's reset the scene. So we are in the perspective view, and let's go to create. Okay, so in create, this is actually where you want to create anything. When you want to start creating anything in Mac, you have to go to create menu, which is in the right hand, and then underneath it you find geometry, shapes, light, camera, etc. So we want to go with the geometry actually. So 3D geometry, and then underneath it you find the standard primitives, and then extended primitives, and so on. So the first one, it's a standard primitive. And what is the standard primitive? It is like, you have a basic 3D object like box, sphere, cylinder, tools, T-boat. This is something they just Max put it in there. And then you have creating the text, 3D modeling, cone, geospheres, and tube, and pyramid, and plane. So the first one is the box. So you drag and drop, and then you drag it up like this to have the height. And you notice here there's the parameters where you can control the length and the width and the height. So even you can put them manually here, okay, to have your object created. Okay, so the second part of the parameters is the segment, which is the lines that any object will contain to give it ability to bend it or rotate it or twist it or even make it more smooth. So the segment in three different directions. The first one and the width direction and the height direction. That will make your object more smooth, and it will give it an ability to break it down to many sub-objects so you can control them easier. Okay, and this is very important when you want to go with the second part of the technique, which is the polygons tools or the poly tools that will make us and allow us to control those sub-objects in this object. Okay, so these are the parameters for the box. So it's the same thing with the others. So if we create sphere, you notice there is radius and then the segment. And if you look at here, you notice this is the sphere, this is the polygon, this is the edges, and this is the vertex statistic, and that will control all of these. The other thing that you can do with the sphere primitive is make it smooth or face it like this, or smoothness, that will allow us to smooth the surface. So if I uncheck, you'll notice it's a rigid, very rigid surfaces, but if I turn it on, that will make it more smooth. The other option is the hemisphere, which is allow us to make it have a sphere like this, or even take part of it and put it in our model. Okay, these two options, it's an animated option, squash and chop. We're not gonna through this right now, and we will just go with the slice mode, and that will allow us to start the sphere from point to another point. For example, sometimes you want to do kind of a primitive sphere, but it's gonna be looks like this. So it's half of the sphere, and then you want to cut maybe even half of it like this. So you put 180, and that will give you half of sphere, like hemisphere with half of the sphere as well. So that gives you more control on those primitive 3D objects. The next one is the cylinder itself. Same thing, you control the radius, the high, and the high segment, and the cap segment as well. Okay, like that. And then there is the side. Sides are very important to make the column or the cylinder very smooth, or even make it like this, like an engon or something. So if I turn off the smoothness, you will notice it's more like engon, that it has, you know, more height. So from the cylinder itself, you can create a different primitive 3D object. And then you have the smooth, like I said, and then you have the slice, which allow us to maybe even create half of the object and so on. The next one is the torus, which is kind of looks like a donut. Okay, that will allow us to control the radius 1 and the radius 2. So the radius 1 is this radius, and radius 2 is the cross section. So this is the radius 1, and this is radius 2. And then the rotation. This is really nice because that will allow us to rotate those sections, you know, like for example, if I have the side like this, I can control the rotation from here. And even I can twist those cross section like this. And we all know there's some of the building design right now, it looks like this. So you don't have to do a lot of work when you create the mass. You just have to play around with those parameters to gain this result. And then the segment, that will allow us to make it more smooth if we need. But again, make sure that you always be careful when you do this, because you want to notice how much polygon and vertices and edges you have. Okay, and then the good thing about the smoothness here in this option, it will allow us to select a different smoothness way, like if you want to just the sides or the segment or none of them or all of them. That will allow us to choose a different smoothness way. And then of course the slice, which will allow us to start and end the slice of the object. So from one primitive you can actually create too many different things. And then the next one is the T-bot. The reason that 3D Studio Max or Autodesk, they put the T-bot including in the primitive, it's very important to use it for the textures, you know, because it's complicated mass. It's not like the torus or box. Those are very simple, but this is like more complicated when you want to add texture on it. So again, you can actually get benefit from this by hide some of the part, and then you just use the body, for example, as a pot or something. You can, you know, use it in different scene. And then the next one, which is the Text Plus. Text Plus, actually it came with Max 2017. It has more features than the other in the old Max version, and it's very important actually. So for example, if I want to go ahead and RKI tick, and then I will go to front view, okay, and then I just press on there, and voila, it's created the text that I just typed it in the field over here. Okay, so I will go rather the wireframe, I will select faces, and then you notice I can create 3D text right away. So you just go ahead and, you know, put it in here in the parameters, and then you can select what kind of font you want to use, of course, on bold or whatever you want, and then you can control the size, tracking, leading, V scale, the vertical and horizontal scale. Okay, that will allow you to manipulate the text however you want. So what they add to the new text tool in Max 2017, they add more, they called it Plus, and they add more features with geometry, so you can do the extrude right away from here, like this, and you can actually add a segment to it. But the good thing is they add the beveling option to it. Okay, so the thing here, so if we go ahead and apply beveling, you will notice how that will create more, more interesting effect, if we will. Okay, and then from here there's like already template in here that will allow you to select a different section to make your 3D text looks different. Okay, so this is about the text. So and then the rest of them, like there is a cone, of course, and there is like geosphere, and the difference here is the geosphere is different than the sphere in a way how the polygons will connect to each other to create the 3D object. Okay, so that was the reason why each one of those, it has its own parameters. And then the final one, it's the plane, which is just, you can create the ground or the floor with it. Okay, we forgot about the tube as well. So you have the tube as well, which is a hollow cylinder. Okay, so this is basically the standard primitive, and you can just go ahead and select each one of those and go through them. The next one, it's the extended primitive. So there is the standard, which is the basic shapes, the box, spheres, and then you have the extended. So they came up with something really different and more complicated than those 3D objects, but they call them primitives because you can control them using their own parameters. So the hydra here, it's kind of a different shapes. You can just go ahead and control them in any way you want. Okay, so you can just go ahead and try each one of those. Chamfer box, which is the same of the box, but it has rounded edges. Okay, so if I go here and hit fillet, that will make it more, has more rounded edges, like you see here. Okay, now we have the oil tank, which is very close to oil tank shapes. Okay, let's go here, and then we go to the modify, so we can control its own parameters. So you can see we can turn it to capsules, and we can blend it, we can give it more side, we can give it high segment, smoothness, slice, same thing. And then you have the spindle, Jenga, all of these extended primitive. It's the same thing. So we don't want to waste time to explain each one, but it's the same idea. It just saves time for us to create a different shapes, a 3D object, I mean, in a different way. So I will just go ahead and create them to give you an idea how they will look like. Okay, this is the prism here. Okay, this is the hose as well. This is very useful, the C section and L section. I use them usually to create a room wall, very quick interior, a room wall. And then the L extend, which is basically sometimes I use it very quickly to create a fence or something, go around the building. So this is really very cool, quick 3D object. So because if I want to create something like this in Max from scratch, I have to create a line, I have to give it extrusion, and I have to give it a thickness, and then we'll have it like this. But it's not going to be a parametric, because this one is parametric. So if I select the go to modify, I can, control each of those walls individually like this, even the width and the thickness of it. So that's why it's very important to learn about those primitives over here. So thank you so much for watching us in this episode, and we will continue the next one, which is the part 2 of modeling technique. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode. Thank you.